Right. All right. Okay. So I am here live. So I'm here live, and I am doing a prAna interview. So we've had to change the channel over to my channel, and hello everybody. So we're just gonna wait for everyone to like come in. Also, I'm holding my phone because I'm not one of those sophisticated people with the stand. So I hope you guys don't mind the jittering, and sometimes you'll see the plants and sometimes you won't. All right. So waiting for prAna right now. Okay. So Britt, are you there? Oh, okay. So
Mario!
I can't believe this. It's incredible.
This was a team
Well,
effort.
I have no idea what that was all about.
Don't worry about it.
Could you have too many followers, or maybe I don't know. Is there something on my end? Maybe I need to change the setting. I have no idea.
Maybe we just broke Instagram because, everyone was just super excited for this chat.
Absolutely.
Well, okay. So I think we might be safe to jump in. Um, so I can definitely kick things off with you. I think where we left off was we just wanted to hear a little bit about you and what you do for those who might not know you or might not be familiar with our adventurer team.
Mhm. So my name is Mario Rigby, and I am an adventure explorer. So I focus on sustainable means of transportation. So I use human-powered propulsion, meaning that I use only my legs, arms, and anything that requires my body to move me through the planet. And one of my claim to fame was walking across Africa. It took me 2.5 years, and it was done entirely by foot. And I kayaked across Lake Malawi, one of the largest lakes in Africa. That took me 2 months. And I think my most recent one was cycling across Canada, which was also quite exciting. And that took me also 2 months. So really, I do all of that, but I also want to focus on human powered propulsion. But at the same time, I like to go into places where there are indigenous people or communities
Mhm.
that can have their voices amplified, and so I try to do that through my platform and through my expeditions.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction. And also, just thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd mentioned earlier that you had reached out to us wanting to have this conversation. And it's had a really great response because I think this is a perfect place to start for us. And so it's just very interesting that we find ourselves in a moment in history where um, there's this cry for justice and support for the Black community. And I think as the world is all watching and listening together at once, we have this opportunity to grow and to understand what it is that we can do moving forward and how we play a role in that. So I did want to ask you first, what does the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you and why is it so important?
I think it means everything to me, and I think it means everything to everyone else as well.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because these were issues that I've had, and I know, amongst my peers, they've had as well. But, I personally, I'm going to be very frankly honest, I wasn't brave enough to go out there and protest like some of the people that are right now. And so I give them all the praise. It's incredible, and they're doing it peacefully, and I
Mm,
think that's beautiful. And because of their efforts, for me personally, I will benefit from that as well because that allows people to see me on an equal level, and I
right.
think that's all we ask for really is to be
Yeah.
treated with respect, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this movement is definitely calling attention to kind of like how deep I guess systemic racism goes, and we're hearing all these stories of how it impacts everyone in the Black community on a daily level. And so I know I personally have experienced some of that discomfort that has been discussed, especially in the outdoors, of feeling like you're the only Black person around, and then kind of
Mm.
asking yourself, why is that? And then also feeling a little bit of that fear of why, or I guess that fear of people kind of questioning that, if that is a perception. And so I wanted to ask you, as a Black explorer, um, what inequity have you experienced too in the outdoors, and how do you think we can change that space so it is more inclusive?
It's honestly it's the silent stuff that really gets to you. The only reason I feel like I've persevered is because I had to push through, and there's something in my head that says, I don't care. I'm going to keep going
Yeah.
despite risking my life. When I was in South Africa is dominated economically, by the white South Africans. And and I walked along the entire coast of South Africa. And if you're there, you feel that you're not really welcomed if you're someone that's Black.
Mm.
And I've been greeted with shotguns and things like that and dirty faces all the time. Police officers stopping me constantly. It's not just something that's in America. It's happening globally.
Hmm.
So, and the thing that I was telling you about is about a silent kind of racism is it's an example of when I'm hiking and going to cottages, for instance, and I want to take a look at a building. I don't want to have security or police called on me.
Mm.
Those are things I have to really think about and worry about is basically not to scare people of my Blackness, which
Oh,
is the
yeah.
craziest thing in the world because the likelihood of, I believe, a Black male doing anything to anyone else outside of his race is very slim, very small. So I don't know where this fear comes from. Maybe
Mm.
propaganda from television. I'm not sure, but I can attest I will never do anything to harm anyone. I'm a gentle giant, but I feel that when I approach people, it inflicts fear
Mm.
into me.
Yeah, that's sad. And I mean, well, so piggybacking off of that idea, I wanted to share that. So prAna at the beginning of the year um, launched its new mission of clothing for positive change, and we have three focuses underneath that, and one of them is adventure for all. So we have kind of three pillars that we focus our commitment on. Respect and responsibility, progress, not perfection, and adventure for all. And I think it's become really clear to us in these past few days that um, one of our biggest and largest tasks under our Adventure for All pillar right now is finding out how we can make the outdoors more inclusive for the Black community so that, you and I don't have to feel things like that. So I wanted to ask what that environment would look like to you if we were to build an inclusive environment for the outdoors. What would that be like?
First of all, I think we have to look at the basically the human aspect of it, which is to how do we include more marginalized communities, but also POC and indigenous communities
Right.
into the outdoors. One thing that I think we miss in the outdoors is that it's a very isolated community,
Mm-hmm.
globally speaking. And if you create a small community in such a way, and you're focusing on enjoying the outdoors and sustainability, you're really missing out a large portion of the rest of the human population.
Right.
And it just comes down as simple as if you include other people, more people are on board to wanting to take care of the environment. More people are wanting to be ready to really move on to the sustainability movement. But
Mm-hmm.
at this moment, we are isolating a lot of communities and a lot of people.
Yeah.
in urban areas, for instance, when you're living in concrete jungles and things like that in the ghetto but not just the ghetto, but other urban areas, then those people find that they have no connection with the outdoors. And
Mm,
so if you want to create a world where you're tackling and fighting climate change, how can you do that with just a very small group of people and you're leaving everyone else behind?
right.
So even if you're not in favor of inclusion, then it's kind of like you're hammering yourself in the foot.
Hmm. That's so interesting. And there's a lot that you said there that I kind of want to dive into. I'll start first by kind of something that you had said to me in a conversation the other day, which was that you were really looking to normalize diversity in the outdoors, which I thought was such a beautiful way of putting it. I think you had even said you'd like to see all the colors of the rainbow in the outdoors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the ways in which you push that mission is just through the embodiment of your work. And I think that's very clear, especially in a big project like um, crossing Africa. And so before we kind of get to that notion that you were talking about, environmentalism and how that's tied with inclusivity, I did want to quickly ask you about that project, crossing Africa, and how you did spend 2.5 years by foot and by kayak, right? Crossing the continent. And because I feel like that's such a powerful way for you to just show what inclusivity in the outdoors could look like.
Yeah. So when I went in a lot of very secluded communities in Africa, I found that all the lingo that I learned about the outdoors were basically throwing down the sink.
Mm.
When you say like, "Oh, I want to go cross country hiking," for instance, they would say, "You mean to walk?" And it's as simple as that, right? So why are we creating this language that separates people from understanding what you mean?
Mm.
So what crossing Africa really taught me was that there have been people who've been, a part of the outdoors and enjoying the outdoors for thousands of years, and even currently today.
Yeah.
One of my most profound moments was actually going into this little town, and there was a community there, and these people they're living in mud homes, but it's actually quite beautiful. It's like a modern mud home, hard to explain,
Mm.
and it's a matriarchal community, and so you're surrounded by all of these older women. And for me, as an explorer, I arrive into these communities, and the only way that you can be greeted into those places, because remember, I had to go from home to home, village to village, to be invited to sleep in their homes, or I
Wow.
had to camp out. And so usually what you do is you stand up there for about an hour to 5 hours, however long it takes, and then the alpha female will approach you, and she will communicate with you. And what if she speaks English, then that's a bonus. If not, then I would have my phone. I would just get someone who speaks their language. I'd be like, hey, can you please tell her that I'm a safe guy? But
Mm.
what they taught me was that these people are so incredibly hospitable, and
Yeah.
they have so little. And I think this is a story that many people know about when they've traveled, when they've gone around.
Hmm.
But you do this here, and people have everything, and yet they're so afraid of strangers or people that look slightly different than them. And that slight difference is like skin pigmentation. And I think it's something that we need to really work on. And I don't think it's an individual per individual problem. I think it's a systemic problem. And I think
Right.
that's what BLM is also addressing, Black Lives Matter,
Hmm.
is that systemically there is an issue fundamentally how we think as human beings. And that needs to be addressed. It's not just like, I think you're black, so I think that you're inferior. What made you think that? You know,
Mm.
what brought you to this point? And so I like to get to the root cause of a lot of those issues. And
Right.
I feel like in rural Africa, when I was walking there, I found that there was a pure sense of just being humane, and they haven't really been indoctrinated to our to our system yet.
Mm.
And so I'm afraid to see that change in Africa, actually. I don't know. I hope I answered that. If not,
Yeah.
please dig into a more specific thing that I should probably talk about.
No, I think that's great. I think I was looking to kind of hear what that expedition was like, and I feel like those are the types of stories that, we wouldn't necessarily know about, having heard of. I mean, that's really going deep into what a 2.5 year trek is. Really showing that you're walking up to people and kind of asking like, can I stay here for the night and things like that. And it's
Mm.
really interesting that you saw really stark differences between our society, which has kind of bred this systemic problem, and then their society. So um, I think that's perfect. That's a perfect answer. I was really just kind of wanting us to see what adventures with you are like, because I think that's how you really lead by example of how people like you and I, the Black community, we can show how capable we are in the outdoors, is what I heard from you. So, in addition to that, I know that you also bring people into the outdoors to help
Mhm.
create that diverse environment. And I think I did see someone asking, like, well, how do you encourage that? So I know you've done some work in that with doing camping trips and guided tours. So can you share a little bit about that work?
Mhm. Absolutely. So the first camping trip and hiking trip that I led was actually in Sudan. And
Wow.
the reason I led it was because there were a group of women that had asked me, like, hey, I see that you're a walker, a hiker, you probably know about the outdoors. Could you take us out to places called Burj Kirtel, I think? So they are one of the 250 pyramids that exist in Sudan. A lot of people
Awesome.
don't know that. They think all the pyramids are in Egypt. And I was like, I'd like to check this out. And so I started this tour, sorry, this camping trip, organized it. I made it completely free for them, so they didn't have to pay, except for I think some gas charges or something like that. Now, these are women that otherwise would never have been allowed
Mm.
to do this. So we had to do this in secret because we're
Oh, wow.
living in a Sharia law country where as a woman, if your hair was exposed, if your skin was exposed other than your ankles, you can't even wear jeans, you can't be
Mm.
out past 8 o'clock. Those are things that would get you arrested or lynched in public. So those were severe conditions, and so we had to be very careful about how we did this. And so I took them out hiking and camping, and it really, I believe, well, from what they said, it's like it's just mind altering, and we had this beautiful fire literally right next to the pyramids, and such a beautiful time. So that moment really sparked me to have an interest in taking people out hiking and camping who otherwise would not be able to or who don't know how to. And so this is
Mm-hmm.
what I continue to do till today.
That's really beautiful. I feel like that is probably the best way, kind of going back to your statement about the more people you get into the outdoors, the more
Mm,
respect they have for the outdoors, and therefore
mhm.
the desire they'll have to protect it. So I feel like that's probably the best way to get people outdoors and experience that nature for themselves and understand that they are a part of it as well. So
Mhm.
that actually segues into my next question, which is there have been some really amazing thoughts echoed by environmentalists recently from the past, that social justice and environmental justice are very connected. And I would love to hear from you how you believe those two philosophies are tied together.
Yeah, so, and this is actually what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Social justice and environmental justice. The two are interlinked together. You cannot separate the two at all. If you look at the indigenous community, for instance, in Canada, and parts of the United States. I
Hmm.
don't know too much what's going on there, but definitely keeping my eye out for what's happening in Canada. You know, they are an indigenous communities that live in rural areas in Canada, in Edmonton, for instance, and they, you know, we've decided like we want to build an oil pipeline through their communities. And so we can see how two things are the same
Right.
thing, but you know what I mean? So you
Yes.
have
Yeah.
environmental and human injustices, and I believe you cannot separate the two. And I think the more we compartmentalize things, the more we don't see it being natural and a part of us. But
Right.
these people, these indigenous communities, they see that. Not only do they see that, but they live that. If you create an oil pipeline through their communities, that literally not just they can't just move because their entire culture, their entire way of
Mm.
being
Yeah.
is dependent on that particular environment in which they live in. And so that's just a small example of
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. Thank you for that example. I feel like that breaks it down really easily for people to understand how the two are connected. I know that you've made environmentalism a big part and focus of your work, not just going out and adventuring, but you really take that to heart too. So I was wondering if you could share about a project in which you do that. So that could be meaning like you're having a really low environmental impact when you're out adventuring or speaking to sustainability in some way.
Yeah. Well, we were actually supposed to work together on a Turks and Caicos project, I remember.
Yes.
But of course, things have taken a turn. You know, that didn't really pan out. But we were supposed to go back to Turks and Caicos Islands. And, you know, I think in Turks and Caicos, we are very focused on environmental sustainability.
Mm.
And part of that is because of, you know, environmental and human injustices, because you know, if there are environmental impacts that are negative in the Turks and Caicos Islands, which is a country of only 35,000 people, then what happens is, you know, our tourism goes down, and tourism is our main source
Mm.
for our GDP, you know, our main source of income. And so if we lose that, then you know we have no way of living really because we don't have agriculture, land, or anything like that. It's purely on tourism. And so
Mm.
if the environmental impact is hammered, then we're screwed. So that's one project that we wanted to work on, which was to do like beach cleanups,
Yeah.
not just for the sake of cleaning up the beach. Actually, in fact, the beach cleanup is just like a mascot or a ploy to create a hope and interest
Right.
in people wanting to clean up after themselves and to see it. And I'm all about normalizing things. I'm always about how can we take something like climate change and environmental justice, and how can we, you know, and quote unquote coolify it? How can we make it so everyone wants to be involved? Not
Yeah,
everybody
brilliant.
wants to do this, and mainly it's because we're so separated from it, right? Like as I mentioned much earlier, that if you're in marginalized communities, these places are typically away from, you know, beautiful parks,
Mhm.
but also, you know, the accessibility to gear and knowledge of understanding, like just simple thing like what's it called? Signing up for camping trips and things like that, or
Right.
campsites. Those things are alien, and they were alien to me as well. Actually, I just learned how to sign up for camping trips like just a few years ago. I'm
Hmm.
not ashamed to say that because you know I'm a part of this whole system as well, and there was just nobody around me to say that. When you're in Africa, you don't have to sign up for camping camping trips, or if you're in the Caribbean, you don't have to sign up for camping trips as well. But we take care of those places.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I know that the Turks and Caicos project really stemmed from your desire to show not just the beauty of the islands, but also the rich culture and history of your home. So I feel like that's definitely that conversation starter is it begins when you just love your home or you're so passionate about where you live, so much so that you want to then do the things to protect it. So I think that's a really cool way of introducing that to people there,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of continuing to build into a movement there. So I can't tell actually how long we've been on here because I know we didn't start at 3 exactly.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Sorry.
but no worries. But I definitely want to hit a couple more questions with you before we wrap up. I think it's very clear that you have, learned so many different perspectives, and seen very unique scenarios in your travels, and you've gotten to know the world quite literally by foot and bike and kayak. So I wanted to ask you, how has traveling changed your worldview of people, and how, maybe why it's just so important for us to come together in unity right now?
Well, I just wanted to, as a disclaimer, so I was born in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and I moved to Germany actually when I was a baby, and I've lived there for a number of years, well into primary school. So my early kind of cultural influence is German, right?
Hmm.
And I never, and I was actually, it's funny because I was the only, my brother and I and my mother actually were the only black people in the entire village, in Stuttgart, Germany, right? And we also lived in Reutlingen, so Mercedes capital of Germany, by the way.
Got it.
So we, I was constantly challenged, um, in just basically being a black person, you know. It's like
Yeah.
it's a very difficult thing to explain because these are things that are kind of confusing me even today.
Hmm.
And then after primary school, I moved to the Caribbean, and moving to the Caribbean allowed me to have another perspective.
Right.
And I think that all of those things help me to see the world in a unique perspective. And that perspective is that I am not just one person, or I don't have to be a certain particular culture, right?
Right.
And so that's made me very malleable. And if you're malleable and you're traveling, I think that's your
Hmm.
best arsenal. So the less you're stuck with what culture you think you need to be,
Hmm.
the easier it is to move around and gel with people. So I could hang around with the Maasai tribe and the Samburu people, and I could just easily live the way that they live. Or I
Yeah.
could move to Italy and I could live like an Italian, or it doesn't matter. Or I could go to Jamaica and just be well, my biological father's Jamaican, but
Okay.
so so it really helped me with the travels, and then the travels that I've done recently helped me solidify the fact that this world is essentially we're all the same. And I know
Yeah.
this song has been sung many times, but we literally are. And
Yeah.
there's a history in Africa, and I'm actually doing a major project in Africa, with MyPad, which is the most influential people of this decade, African people of this decade,
Oh,
and
awesome.
they're part of the United Nations.
Okay.
And they've asked me to do a project called Project Roots, which is essentially to retrace the West African slave trade and to do a story about how, and not to do a story about how, but to do a story to basically empower
Yeah.
people from the diaspora and basically take back our history and and learn from what happened in the past, but also at the same time move forward
Hmm.
with what we learned. And so this is a 5-part docu-series that we were going to do in terms of who we are as a people. And I think that allows us to even travel more as Black people because
Yeah.
we feel also threatened to go to certain countries. There are places where even I had to look at, it's like, are these people racist? Am I going to be lynched on the street? Am I going to be shot at, or am I going to be arrested unnecessarily for a number amount of times, So, those are things I have concerns about.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a privileged person, then if you're a Western privileged person, you're not necessarily thinking about those things. You're thinking I think the number one thought in most people's head who are traveling is like, am I going to have enough money to travel there? And that, as opposed to like, oh, is my life at stake because of the color of my skin?
Right. Um, you said so much there. I think one of the biggest, I mean, it's a good thing. I think one of the biggest takeaways I have from that is just the fact that we are all connected. And I think you can demonstrate that alone with just, like you said, kind of stripping yourself away from the siloed cultures and, labels that we put on ourselves. And at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all connected, as the song goes. But I think this would actually be a really good time because you mentioned a project that you're working on. This would be a good time to share some additional projects or maybe add to the one that you mentioned. I know you had talked to me previously about the docuseries kind of following along the West African trade route. So what types of adventures do you have on the horizon right now?
So the closest one that I have is kayaking across Lake Ontario. So
Okay.
essentially, this is just training for project routes because my plan
Yes.
is to kayak across the Atlantic Ocean, which should take me roughly 60 to 90 days, depending on if you get stuck in a cyclone or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Or nothing.
No big deal.
Or yeah, so kayaking Lake Ontario is for training, and
Hmm.
then the second expedition is to go to Nunavut and to look at how climate change has affected the indigenous communities in those regions. So I'm
Mm,
going there to film and interview a lot of the people that are there and ask them questions because I feel like we don't highlight these people enough, and when we do, we look at them in a like we answer for them. We say like, oh, look at these poor people or something like that. But I don't necessarily think that. If you go to Africa, for instance, in Eastern Africa, I can't speak for all countries there, but in Tanzania and Kenya, they've really Ethiopia as well, a lot of the people have really embraced their indigenous communities. And you can
mm,
see them walking around with pride, that they're still wearing their traditional outfits, which is incredible. It's so cool.
yeah.
It's like watching superheroes around you constantly. It's just like, how's
I love
how do
that.
we get to this point where we're just like, oh, we don't want indigenous communities and we look down on them? It's
Mm,
that says a lot about your own insecurities, and
mm,
I think that needs to be addressed. And
yeah.
I wanted to actually move this into also talking about the outdoor industry,
Right.
the responsibility of the outdoor industry. A
Hmm.
lot of them have been reaching out to us recently. We can see that by the followers of a lot of outdoor community, like I think Brown Girls, Outdoor Adventure. You're looking at, Juju. These are my friends that are in Canada, and there's a lot more. There are people in the U.S. as well.
Hmm.
And they're getting a lot more supporters and followers, and the only reason that's happening is one is because people are just realizing that, whoa, there are this other community people that I haven't even thought of.
Right.
And so as an outdoor company, I think it takes a lot of due diligence to try to push um, the message, and not only just the message, but
Yeah.
really taking in people of color and marginalized communities and going in there and marketing to them and also supporting them
Hmm.
in a way that you could maybe give them rental equipment, or you could, speak to them and have
Yeah.
people that are similar to them part of your ambassadorship role or part of your headquarters, people in lead positions.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things that I think we need to do, and I
Yeah.
think we're just at the beginning. And I can hear the conversations, and I'm hearing it from all different ends, and
Yeah.
it's really it's a lot of stuff happening right now, and you're being bombarded with a lot of questions with people saying like, "Whoa, I didn't know. We're so sorry," and
Hmm.
it's really nice to see that people are realizing it and understanding that there has been a struggle. Like the expeditions that I've done have really not been recognized a lot. So
Mm.
if I had died, I don't think the story would live on and it would be forgotten in
Huh.
history. But a lot of the other, white explorers have done, expeditions even half the size and they're remembered in the history books.
Hmm.
So, we need to really focus on a different kind of branding and a different kind of approach
Yeah.
to really involve different communities to the outdoor industry. And particularly from what I said earlier, which was the more people are involved, the better the planet is off.
Yes. I totally agree. Well, that actually answered a lot of my last question, which was kind of
Yeah.
out of curiosity and wanting to learn what prAna can do to
Mm.
either support you in your mission to normalize diversity in the outdoors or support the Black Lives Matter movement and just push forward our desire to create positive change. But I think you've listed a lot there, so if there's anything else that you want to add to that, please feel free to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Hire talented POC members, people of
Yeah.
color, indigenous people. When I say
Yeah.
talented, I mean like, don't just hire anyone, but hire people that are really, and if there aren't any talented people that are in that particular field, train them, give them
Hmm.
the tools,
Yes.
go out there. I think it's a very proactive move that I feel like prAna and all these other outdoor companies need to do. And I think prAna has essentially supported me for the last 2 years. So that was pretty huge because no other companies, well, a few other companies, Mac, MEC, Arc'teryx,
Yes.
supported me, outdoor apparel companies. But other companies have looked at like I don't want to say names, but
We won't. We won't.
other companies have literally said to me like, "Yeah, you're not the look that we're looking for at this moment." And I looked at their roster and I was like,
Hmm.
nobody looks like me. So I'm like, all right, I guess that's not gonna happen anytime. So really, change the way your roster looks like, change the way that your, people at the top look like. And if you can't find these talented people, then train them,
Yeah.
you know?
I love that. I love that idea. It's like it just doesn't stop there just because you can't find someone or you don't have
Exactly.
access to that community. Like that's not really an excuse, I feel like. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking to an explorer, so there's literally never, I'm never going to quit,
Right.
And
Exactly.
I think the skill of an explorer is to look how to survive in some of the most harshest conditions and also
Mm,
having perseverance.
yes.
And all I ask for is like for people to have even just half of that. If you have half of that, then, we can go quite far. I don't expect anyone to walk across Africa or kayak across the Atlantic Ocean, but I do expect people to push further than what they've done before. And I
Yeah.
think that's exciting. And I think why not? You're living up to something that's a greater purpose than just yourself. And I think that's very fulfilling. You'll be happy, you'll be content, and enjoying the outdoors at the same time. Like life is good. It's
I
all
know.
about having a good time.
Win, win, win. Yeah,
It
that
is.
wow. That's so beautiful. Um, there was something that I was going to say after that, but yeah, oh, I was just going to share that I appreciate that knowledge and I guess suggestions and recommendations of what we can do as a brand. And I think the conversations are definitely happening at the office. I think, we've progressed a little bit in the area, and I think we understand that there's so much more that we can be doing. And I think this is just kind of we're working through those next steps, and I'm really excited, as you said, just to see us pushing this forward and just, creating positive change all around. So
Absolutely.
so I really appreciate that, and you taking the time to share that not only with us, but just the audience here with us as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and also take the time to follow other people of color who
yes.
are in the outdoors. It's not just me. There are so many other people. And the categories are all varied all over the place. You have surfers, you have mountain
Hmm.
climbers, you have cyclists, you have hikers, people who just love the outdoors and they want to share that passion.
Yeah,
I happen to be an explorer, so I'm just one of the few different categories of which you could have interest in.
that's awesome. Well, I think we probably will be wrapping up soon, but I did just want to thank you so much, Mario, for your time again, and allow you to share any further thoughts on any of the topics that we talked about today or outside of that. Just before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that you have this platform to speak on what you feel and your truth, because this was a great opportunity for us to have you on. And well, we're on your channel now, but really just to leverage this platform to have these conversations and do these things.
I just want people to get it passionate in the
Mm-hmm.
outdoors.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mario. We definitely will be following you. I know that for a fact. And hopefully people will also be joining you along your upcoming journeys. It sounds like you have a lot of really awesome adventures planned, and we can't wait to see you on those and support you through them. Also, we'll make sure to look out for the next episode of the Turks and Caicos docu-series, which we'll be sharing on the prAna channel as well. So I know my eyes are out for that. I don't know if you would like to try and take any questions, but if not, we can always put a question sticker on our prAna stories and have people submit there, and we can always continue the conversation that way. I don't know. Oh, I forgot. We're on your channel. So if questions did pop up on your question
Yeah.
sticker.
So there were some questions. Some people asked, am I raising money for the kayak expedition? So I've decided
Hmm.
actually I don't want to raise money for my expeditions anymore
Got
I
it.
don't do that anymore after crossing Africa.
Okay.
Um, so I do fundraising through organizations or through companies. Because what I found was that a lot of the people who did support me on my last expedition, which I'm incredibly grateful for, especially crossing Africa, if it wasn't for them, I would literally, I wouldn't be able to do it. It takes a
Hmm.
village to do those kinds of things. And the reason I didn't do it anymore is because a lot of the people who supported me were people, in marginalized communities and people who were also Black and they wanted to support their own kind.
Hmm.
And, I feel like, why would they have to do that when companies can have the power, literally. All they have to say is, yes, I will support 0.5% of our, finances into this project. So, so now I'm really pushing for companies to go out and do this.
Awesome. It's a great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. So yeah. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to, DM me and I'll for the next like 45 minutes, I'll be on my Instagram and I'll respond to everything.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you. Thank you, boy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, it was great speaking with you today. I think I will, I guess if you can just make sure to save this video to your Instagram
Oh
as an
yeah.
IGTV, when the video pops or when you hit end, it'll pop up and ask you if you'd like to save it to IGTV. Sometimes there is an option to also download the video file to your camera roll. If you can
Perfect.
do that, we can then post it to our page as well, so that those because I was thinking about our interview, and if people came to the prAna page and were like, where's
Right.
Mario and Britt? So if you can do that, that's awesome. If not, no worries. We can at least get it, direct people to your page. But this has been an incredible conversation, and everything you've said is just so profound and moving. And I've taken so much away from this conversation and the previous conversation we had the other day. It really means a lot to me. And I'm going to wrap up before I get emotional. But this means a lot to us, Mario. So
Yeah.
thank you again for your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm gonna, yeah, I probably should leave too, otherwise I'll get
Okay.
emotional.
Alrighty.
Well,
Well, thank you
we'll chat
again,
soon.
everyone, for
Okay, bye
joining.
everyone. Take care.
Take
Thank you for
care.
listening. Ciao.
Yes. Until next time.
Hmm.